Welcome back to Philosophy Unpacked. Today we're tackling a really powerful and often misunderstood idea from Nietzsche, the concept of self-surpassing.
That sounds intense. I know Nietzsche's work can be quite dense. He starts by talking about a will to truth. What exactly does he mean by that?
That's a great starting point. He's addressing the wisest ones, philosophers and scientists, and questioning their motivation to understand everything, to find the ultimate truth.
Isn't the pursuit of knowledge a good thing? Why would he be questioning that fundamental drive to learn and make sense of the world around us?
He argues that this will to truth is actually a disguise for something else. He calls it a will for the thinkableness of all being, a desire to make reality predictable.
So it's less about discovering truth and more about imposing our own order onto a chaotic world, forcing it to make sense to us?
Exactly. He says reality shall accommodate and bend itself to you. This desire to make the world a mirror of our own minds is, for Nietzsche, a form of the will to power.
Ah, the famous will to power. So even the act of creating theories or systems of knowledge is an expression of this will to control and dominate?
That's his point. He says this is your entire will, even when you speak of good and evil or create value systems. You want to create a world you can control.
That's a radical idea, suggesting our moral frameworks aren't objective but are tools for power. How does he describe this playing out in society?
He uses a powerful metaphor. He says the common people are like a river, and floating on this river is a boat filled with these solemn, disguised estimates of value.
So the values of good and evil are just passengers on the river of life, not the river itself. Who put them in the boat in the first place?
It was the wisest ones, the thinkers and leaders. He says, it was ye who put such guests in this boat, ye and your ruling will.
So they create the moral compass, and the river of history just has to carry it along. Is the river or life's chaos the main danger then?
Interestingly, no. He says the real danger isn't the river, but the will itself, the will to power, which he describes as an unexhausted, life-creating force.
Okay, so to understand our values, we first need to understand this deeper, more fundamental drive. How does he propose we do that?
He says to understand his gospel of good and evil, he must first tell us his gospel of life. He does this by observing the nature of all living things.
He's grounding this abstract idea in observable nature. That's helpful. What were his key observations about how living things behave?
He found three main things. First, he says that wherever he found living things, he also heard the language of obedience. All living things are obeying things.
That seems a bit absolute. Does he mean obeying a leader or something else? Can you give an example of what that kind of obedience looks like?
It can be anything. A plant obeys its nature by growing towards sunlight. An animal obeys its instincts. A person obeys laws, social norms, or their own principles.
I see. It's about following some kind of directive, whether internal or external. What was his second observation about life's nature?
His second point is that whatever cannot obey itself is commanded. This implies that if you lack self-discipline or an inner drive, you will inevitably follow someone else's will.
So it's either you direct yourself or you will be directed by others. That makes sense. What was the third and final thing he heard?
The third point is perhaps the most surprising. He says that commanding is actually much more difficult and risky than obeying.
That definitely goes against conventional wisdom. Most people would assume being the boss is the easy part. Why did he think commanding was so hard?
Because the commander carries the burden and responsibility for everyone who obeys. More importantly, every command is a risk, a gamble that could lead to their own destruction.
So a leader is constantly staking their own position and well-being with every decision they make. Is that what he means by risk?
Yes, and it even applies when you command yourself. You become your own judge, avenger, and victim. You must hold yourself accountable for your own laws.
That paints a very demanding picture of self-mastery. It's a heavy responsibility. So what drives this whole dynamic of obeying and commanding?
This leads him to his central revelation. He asks what persuades life to do this, and the answer is the will to power, which he finds everywhere he looks.
So this will to power isn't just for kings and generals. He found it in every living thing, from the top to the bottom of the hierarchy.
Precisely. He says, even in the will of the servant found I the will to be master. Everyone is striving, in their own way, to exert their will.
How can a servant, who is defined by obeying, also have the will to be a master? That seems like a contradiction in terms.
The servant persuades their will to serve the stronger person, but only so they can have the delight of being master over someone even weaker than themselves.
It's a chain of command, or a pecking order, where everyone wants to have influence on the next rung down. Is that the idea here?
Yes, and it goes all the way up. Even the greatest person surrenders themselves and stakes their life for the sake of gaining more power and influence.
That's a fascinating twist. Even things we consider selfless, like sacrifice and love, are part of this dynamic for Nietzsche, aren't they?
Indeed. He says where there is sacrifice and love glances, there is also the will to power. The weaker person finds subtle ways to gain power over the stronger one.
Could you give an example of that? How can a weaker person gain power through love or service in a subtle way?
Think of a devoted assistant who becomes so indispensable that their boss can't function without them. The assistant, through service, has gained a significant amount of indirect power.
That makes sense. It's a more nuanced form of control. So what is the ultimate secret that life reveals to him about all this?
Life itself speaks to Zarathustra and says its deepest secret is this: behold, I am that which must ever surpass itself.
It must ever surpass itself. So life's fundamental drive isn't just to exist or to reproduce, but to constantly overcome and become more?
Exactly. He directly refutes the idea of a will to existence. He says what already exists doesn't need to will itself into existence. The drive is for more.
So this is the true will to power. Not a will to live, but a will to grow, to expand, to overcome limitations and challenges.
That's the core of it. Only where there is life is there also will. Not, however, will to life, but, so teach I thee, will to power.
This idea of self-surpassing is really powerful. It reframes our whole purpose. Can you give another concrete example of what that looks like?
Think of a company like Apple. After creating the revolutionary iPhone, they didn't just stop. They had to surpass that success with the next model and the next.
That's a great modern analogy. It's about constant innovation and growth. But Nietzsche mentions something about becoming an enemy to what you love.
Yes, that's the painful part of self-surpassing. Life creates something, loves it, but then must become adverse to it in order to create something new and better.
So you have to be willing to let go of or even destroy your past achievements in order to keep moving forward and growing.
That's the paradox of creation. An artist must move beyond their most famous style to explore new territory. That's the will to power walking on crooked paths.
This ties everything back to the beginning, doesn't it? This must also apply to our values of good and evil, which you said aren't permanent.
Precisely. He says that good and evil, which would be everlasting, it doth not exist. They must also surpass themselves again and again.
So the people who create new values, the creators, must first tear down the old systems of good and evil that came before them.
Yes, he states clearly, he who hath to be a creator in good and evil, verily he hath first to be a destroyer and break values in pieces.
So the greatest good, which is creating something new, often involves what looks like the greatest evil, which is destroying the old sacred order.
That's the challenging conclusion. Think of the scientific revolution, destroying old religious dogmas to build a new model of the universe. It was seen as evil by many.
It's a call for a kind of creative destruction on a cultural and moral level. What is his final word on this matter?
His final message is a call to action. He says we must speak of these difficult things because suppressed truths become poisonous. We shouldn't fear breaking things.
So we should embrace the truth that challenge our foundations, even if they cause old structures to collapse and fall apart.
Exactly. He ends with a hopeful note, and let everything break up, which can break up by our truths. Many a house is still to be built.
A truly profound and challenging perspective. It redefines our quest for knowledge, our moral values, and our very purpose as a constant act of self-surpassing.
It absolutely does. It forces us to see power not as a crude force, but as the fundamental creative engine of life itself, driving everything to become more.
So every time we push our limits, learn a new skill, or challenge an old belief, We are participating in this universal will to power.
That's a perfect way to summarize it. It's the engine of personal growth and civilizational change, constantly breaking old shells to allow for new life.
This gives a whole new meaning to the phrase, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." It's not just about survival, it's about actively surpassing.
Yes, it transforms the idea of struggle from a negative experience to a necessary component of growth and the expression of life's deepest will.
A difficult but ultimately empowering message. Thanks for breaking that down. There's so much to think about there, especially in our rapidly changing world.
My pleasure. It's a concept that remains incredibly relevant, urging us to be creators and to have the courage to build anew. That's all for today's episode.